one thing I like to have people do is to read the biographies and read the stories of people who've come before you. Here's why. What is going to show you is that one, people's problems, people have had more problems than you, have been in a worse position than you, have grew up maybe with no parents, with less parents, and they are doing way better than you are. What does that mean? Now, for some people, that makes them uncomfortable. But the point is that people have so much comfort they don't even realize that they do. So the first step generally in helping such an individual is to actually show them have them see for themselves rather how they're really being comfortable. And not in that the feelings are not valid, not in that the mental health is not valid for men. That is an actual thing that we ignore. And I actually believe it is important. But in that they need to understand that as much as certain things may have happened before, as much as the situation may be valid, there is so much better out there for them.
Listen to the vibes.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. And I'm very happy to welcome Mr. Craige Hardell here, all the way from the Caribbean, huh?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about yourself.
First of all, Kyle, it's a pleasure to be on. Pleasure to be on your podcast. And just a bit about me. My name is Craige Hardell. I'm a mindset and accountability coach, and I help ambitious entrepreneurs and professionals get past burnout and reach their full potential. And also, I do serve as a front-end website strategist. So I do help actual professionals themselves really plan out their marketing and really get their dream customers in a way that feels good to them and not just following random tactics online. So generally, these are the verticals that I work in. And generally, I really seek to help ambitious individuals reach their full potential. So in a nutshell, that is who I am and what I do.
Okay. I noticed we had something in common, and I don't know how comfortable you are speaking about it, but I noticed that you had lost a child.
Yeah, good observation actually. And it's been a bit since this happened, but as you know, and as you know, since we have this in common, it's something that never completely escapes you. You know, it's something that's always at the back of your mind and something that will always be lingering even after you've had more children, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've had more children yet, but for me, generally, I mean, I was affected by it, you know. I wasn't bawling out, but still, it really hurt because we all have those projections of what we want our children to be like, you know, on how we want them to be a reflection of us, whether it's mistakes that we made, we don't want them to make, or ways that we wanted to give them better opportunities than we had. So when you lose a child, for me, in my mind, it's like you still lose a part of you. And I know, especially women, mothers, it affects them a lot, maybe differently, but for me, that's really a part of me that probably no one will ever see. And life goes on. It doesn't help to stay in the grief, but the point is that it really is something that changed in my perspective. And it's funny about this because it's part of what led me to transition to be a coach. Because not only that I see that a lot of people, especially young men, have a lot of potential, and that looks different for everybody, by the way. It's not just being an Elon Musk or making $1 million or driving a Lamborghini. That's fine, but that definition is different for all of us. But there are a lot of people who have dreams, they have goals, right? In their own definition, and they just give up. They let life beat them up, and they don't really take any initiative past the status quo that people believe that they can't do, if I'm making sense.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people end up really living lives of quiet desperation, like the great Ralph Waldo Emerson calls it. And so for me, feeling such a low moment, and there were other things that happened, failed relationship. I mean, the mother and I, we were not together anymore. It's been a while, but being in such a low moment and having so many other things go wrong, even as a teacher and now transitioned fully online, really inspired me to help those who have the potential, they have the ambition, they want more for themselves, their families, they want to really serve the world in some particular fashion. That is what really pushed me to take the leap and actually aspire to help those individuals.
Well, we lost 5 children. Um, 4 of them were just miscarriages, but the last one was almost a full term. You actually got to see your child before the child passed away, right?
Yeah, mine passed away after 3 days, and I actually did see him actually. And in those early days in the incubator and whatnot, but I remember he was actually struggling with something. I mean, I still have the photos. I just keep it private just to me because it's something that you always live with you. And you know, yeah, it's just hard to, it's something you can never wash off. It's not a bad thing, but I'm just saying there's a part of you, even if you move on, like I said a while ago, and even if you have other kids and they grow up, and there is a part of you that you'll always be missing. For me, that's how it lands for me. And whether that particular scenario, and sorry for your losses, by the way, I really know what it feels like. But whether it's that scenario or whether it's generally people who just give up on themselves, especially young men. I mean, I work with both men and women, but young men, I don't want to jump ahead if you have an actual question on this, but a lot of young men now, there's not much hope for them. Statistics have shown that over 20% of men only receive attention from women, meaning that 80% almost no one cares about them. I'm not just talking about romantic or sexual manner, but that they feel ostracized by society and they really have no one to turn to, apart from inspirational messages that they see online. And that is a big part of why they turn to nefarious activities, crime, shootings, right? Other forms of theft is because that outlet is not there. You understand? And they need a guiding voice. They need voices that really speak positive light into them. They need somebody that tells them as much as they screwed up before, whether it's going to jail, whether it's a divorce, miserable divorce, whether that's losing children, like we spoke about. It doesn't matter how low that you go. If you believe that, if you really want to get up, you can. And the only one who's responsible for that, and the only one who really can get yourself there is you. And the moment you take ownership of that is the moment that your life actually shifts, because you really only can go as far as you believe that you can. You cannot outperform your belief system. And your belief system may have been formed by your experiences. It may have been shaped by people around you, whether it's your family, your friends. Sometimes our environment really molds so much of our psyche, and we don't even realize until we step out or until we reach rock bottom and we have this peak awareness that, there isn't that low. So what more do I have to fear? Right? And most people, it takes hitting rock bottom for them to really begin to take the actions that they need to take. And there is a beauty in that, but it doesn't always have to be that way. If you're willing to take instruction, if you're willing to do the work, right? We all need to really do the work, whether it's internally, whether it's in the things we're not really deficient in. So my message generally is that people who really want to succeed, it's possible, no matter what your past looks like. It may not be easy, it's possible. And as you begin to move in a direction towards what you really, as long as you have this clarity, you begin to move in the correct direction. That is where instruction, that is where advice, that is where really the minutia really comes in. But if that belief is not there, if that hope, like Martin Seligman in his book speaks about Pavlov's experiment with the shock dogs. I'm not sure if you know this, where that the dogs were electrocuted and they were conditioned to not jump out of the cage, and the cage was very, very low. So the analogy is that most people in their lives, they see what they want, they see the goals that they have for themselves, the ideals, but they've been conditioned to be passive. They've been conditioned to believe that they're average, believe that they've been conditioned to stay in the boxes that people condition them to be in. And I want to help them get out of that.
Yeah, I have to say, like when I was growing up, and don't get me wrong, I love my father, and I know my father loved me, but he seemed to be more dedicated to his work than he was to the family. If it hadn't been for my grandfather, I don't know where I'd be right now.
Yeah. So I was saying, and I know it was you that was speaking, that a lot of young men in particular feel like they have no hope. You know, when you look at declining college education opportunities for men, you know, the focus really on female empowerment. And female empowerment is not a bad thing, right? Because there are a lot of females who were marginalized, and I don't want to get too deep into those topics because that could be a rabbit hole. But a lot of it comes at the expense of men, in that men have had too much power in society. So on a collective level, you find a lot of young men as they mature, there is not really much focus on their development. And as they become adults, as they become fully able-bodied working people, right? You find that they have less opportunities. And while you may not control what people hand to you, I mean, none of us are entitled. A lot of them end up just resigning to being average, despite having much lofty ambitions. And that is something you have to find yourself. Even like you were saying with your actual father. I mean, I haven't always had the best relationship with mine either, you know, and so I really know what that's like. But we have to understand that people have faults themselves, meaning the people that you may not get along very well with. And we have to have the awareness, not always let that keep us stuck in a particular paradigm because none of us can change our past,
Sure.
right? However, we have to have not just the awareness, not just the willingness, but also the actual conviction followed through to actually become the people that we're really meant to be, not just for ourselves, but for our families, for society, etc. And then the fulfillment that we're after in life, the meaning, whether it's how much money you really wanted to make, maybe you want to start a family, you want to be in a particular position, or maybe you just want to, you have particular ideals, particular goals, and not just getting by. Whether getting by is living paycheck to paycheck. And again, if that's somebody, that's fine. But what I'm saying is that you need to have the courage to set standards for yourself and actually achieve those. And generally, as long as you're doing that, whatever that looks like, generally that is where really a meaningful life begins to come from, whatever that looks like for you.
No, as I was saying before, I at least had my grandfather to be an example. I feel for these kids who don't have anyone. I mean, both parents are needed to raise a child. I know a lot of times society will give you a different message, but I believe you need both parents to raise a child. And even if you can't be together, you can still be, both parents be a part of the child's life. I don't know how it is over there, but I know that here in America, it seems like men are being stripped of any power they have anymore. And I can see why there's a lot of confusion. Kids don't know what to do nowadays. They're being told through social media and the rest of society how they should be, and then parents try to teach them something different. And I don't know if this has anything to do with what you teach, but I've noticed with like the new feminist movement here, men are getting more and more scared to talk to women anymore.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
they don't know if they're going to be branded as a creep just for asking a lady out or what. I mean, what do you see over there, and what would your advice be for us over here?
The demasculinization, it's funny I said this 3 times, of men is a global phenomenon. I mean, a lot of media comes from the US, Hollywood, streaming platforms, their original content, social media platforms, most of this comes from the US. So the influence from the US is definitely very heavy. However, I could tell you, though culturally, and I haven't been to all the continents and generally other parts of the world, but from what I'm hearing, the impact of feminism is pervasive. And it's something that most men, the trickle down effect of this, they struggle with on an individual level. I mean, you did mention it in that a lot of them don't feel like they can fairly holler or really reach out to the young lady. It need not be anything extremely sexual. It could just be something really casual because the lines of what is deemed appropriate has become blurred, right? When you have things like Me Too movement, and you have things like other ways that people now could remove consent even for things in the past, you know, things like that. Seeing things like that in the media shocks most people. When you look at things like divorce laws, actually, and how it's really biased towards the woman, right? And people have their opinions on that. But the thing is that what good, a lot of men have redounded to that. What good is it for me to be a man? What benefit is there for me? After I work so hard throughout my years, right? After I build a foundation for myself and for my potential family, or the current one that I have right now, I could just lose it all one day, or someone could just take it from me, you know? And I mean, this goes deep because we live in a world now where the drive is to make women equal and better than men. And the policymakers generally don't see how much of an effect this is having on the average male. I'm not talking about the average male who makes, well, that'll be above average, who makes six figures, who is well to do, who does well for themselves. Most men are not at this level.
Nope.
And the fact is, you cannot just preach the message of doing just that, because most people either don't want to do this well or they just won't get it, and that's fine. But the thing is, whenever you have average people believing that average people are not good enough for them, I'm referring to the different genders here, it's gonna create a huge issue. And I mean, one statistic is that 20% of men, and this is a US study, only get all the women. So the point is, there's a huge issue there. And as we know, we were meant to socialize. As much, it doesn't matter how much money that you have in the bank, relationships will always be something that's important. So if they don't have fulfillment in that part of their lives, it's going to affect them, right? Yeah. And a lot of coaching, a lot of people who give advice don't factor in the entire psyche of the individual, right? And that's a problem, because at the end of the day, we're all people. We'll be on the internet, we'll be on opposite continents having this interview right now. But once we hop off, we go back to our regular lives, right? Once you hop off, you close the computer for the day. It's good old regular life, good old trip to the supermarket, gas station, etc., etc. And that part of individuals, because we are online, we have this pressure to be perfect all the time, the perfect picture, the perfect background, the perfect social media shot, right? Most people, in terms of the actual reality, it's really fake. So if most people who you believe are authentic are actually inwardly or deeply fake, where is the real role models to copy? So I'm trying to outline this issue from multiple angles here. But when it comes to masculinity generally declining, when it comes to the lack of role models for men, whether it's in politics, I mean, most of what you say is just slandering. And I don't want to take the conversation too wayward, just slandering, etc., etc. But less and less people are stepping up. Unless and less people generally are becoming more complicit in that they accept particular things that happen, whether it's the Federal Reserve, whether it's other acts that really infringe on their rights. So it's not just that in terms of mating and dating, but in terms of the confident in terms of their ability to have thoughts for themselves, that's declining as well.
So how do you start to build a confidence when, number one, you're seeing a lot of men who are being emasculated, and two, some of us are our own worst enemies and our own worst critics. Yeah, I've beat myself up for years thinking that I'm not good enough. I mean, where do you begin?
Yeah, a lot of the self-loathing that we have, a lot of it is conditioned, first of all. And yes, a lot of it is self-inflicted. And it comes from a myriad of things. One, and that's the beauty of being a man, especially. And I'm not sure how much of your audience is female, but females generally have their own path as well. So you're not really being excluded here. What I'm saying is that a lot of people do not have the confidence that comes from dealing with a bit of struggle in their lives. We live in a society where life has become so much easier. You have technology at the push of a button for everything that you want, right? Remember, there's a time where people used to have a buggy and a horse. It's a long time ago. But now we have automobiles that we can drive around. And now we have automobiles that can drive us around without doing anything, right? And now that the newspaper used to be a huge thing, then went up to the television, and now we could watch news, we could stream content whenever we want, you know? So one, you have to realize we live in a time where there's so much ease. And a lot of us, our survival instincts have become dulled, right? And what all of this ease has caused is that it's really caused us to have a lot of time to really worry about non-essential things. And by that, I mean that a lot of first world problems, right? Mental health is very important. I know there's a famous YouTuber. I want to mention the name, but I don't know how sensitive the algorithms are. And he said that depression wasn't real. And as a coach, when I heard this, immediately I'm skeptical, because we all know, you may know people who are clinically depressed. But where is really getting to is not the fact that the psychological condition is not real, because we know it is. It's the fact that a lot of the conditions that we have, it's come about of a lot of comfort. There are people who have seen wars. There are people who have, and I'm not saying the average person have to have seen that, but we have to realize that a little bit of hardship in the beginning actually helps you grow. So once you have that to compare to, generally, a lot of the problems that we have aren't as severe. Now, I am not diminishing anyone's issues. However, we have to realize we live in a time that's much better than the olden days. Secondly, so this is one, changing your perspective as to how much you really have going for you. Number two, generally, people do not have the confidence to dream forward. They don't have the confidence to really see what they want, who they want to become, and simply hold that image there. Whether it's a critical spouse, whether it's critical parents, whether it's your boss who's constantly putting you down, have conditioned you to believe that the only vision that you should have is the one that I have for you. And it's not about people having confidence in you, but we've been conditioned, like I said in the beginning, to not really dream as big as we want to, right? And that obviously will cause a lack of confidence, because we're always acting from how we feel right now. We're always acting from how slow that the day seems. And we're never fully focused on what is that we're really after. Why are we going through so much pain? Why are we making the sacrifice, right? The great visionaries of this world always had something that was bigger than themselves. Just like when you become a parent, as you would know, it's really shifting in that you only know that you're responsible for another human being. That person and their survival and how well they grew up, I have a big part to play in that. So my problems, they're important, but they're not always the most important thing. And that may cause you to make decisions sometimes that may not help you, they may not be pleased by it, but helps them in the long run. So as parents, we have this shift of perspective, but generally, most people do not have the courage. And I say courage because we've been conditioned to want average lifestyles, whether it's simply a house, whether it's simply a 401k, like it's in the US. And there's nothing wrong with those things. But I'm just saying that once we want more, we typically shoot ourselves down. And typically the lack of confidence, that's where it comes from. And it comes from there because as you begin to look at what you want more, whether it's you have a vision board, or whether you have something that reminds you of this constantly, it will change your state because you realize the gap that there is. And most people cannot deal with that discomfort. And once you see that discomfort, then you begin to do something about it. Then you begin to focus really on what is it that you want outside of your bubble right now. And typically that's where the lack of confidence comes from. Because one bad thought, one letdown, one disappointment, it spirals upon the other. And that is why a lot of people have midlife crises. That's why a lot of people, they're really disillusioned, but they're going to work every day, right? They're going to work every day, but life seems to have no meaning. Life always has meaning. And it comes from you challenging yourself constantly.
I see a lot of young folks who they have no responsibility. They've been given everything in life, and they manufacture these problems in their heads that really aren't there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you deal with people like that on a regular basis?
Yes, I do. And one thing I like to have people do is to read the biographies and read the stories of people who've come before you. Here's why. What is going to show you is that one, people's problems, people have had more problems than you, have been in a worse position than you, have grew up maybe with no parents, with less parents, and they are doing way better than you are. What does that mean? Now, for some people, that makes them uncomfortable. But the point is that people have so much comfort, they don't even realize that they do. So the first step generally in helping such an individual is to actually show them, have them see for themselves rather, how they're really being comfortable. And not in that the feelings are not valid, not in that the mental health is not valid for men. That is an actual thing that we ignore, and I actually believe is important. But in that they need to understand that as much as certain things may have happened before, as much as the situation may be valid, there is so much better out there for them. And there is so much more that they could do if they just quit beating themselves up. So it really starts by shifting the individual. That is why generally all this free information on the internet, people still don't get results because the real work is uncomfortable, right? The real work where maybe you go to therapy, maybe you really take some time and you change your body, right? Maybe you're overweight and you know that is the actual reason, or that's a big part of why you're probably not getting the relationships that you want. Or maybe as a man, you don't make enough money, right? And maybe you're just not there. Maybe you do not have your foundations in place yet. And it takes someone like me to tell you that. And it's not that I'm mean, but I have to be honest, right? People are not used to that level of honesty and they wonder why they're not miserable. So one, people need to shake off their, not just the comfort, but the belief that things are entitled for them, whether that's relationships, whether that's a particular career, whether that's a particular job, right? And once you're not as entitled, generally you have the actual mindset to make the effort. And that's when the how will help you, right? And that's why we always say that a lot of people, it's not just money that you need to be successful. Because I could show you how to start a business with almost no money down, but you have to still do the work, right? And the point is the opportunities are there. Similarly, so one could really show you how to change, how to really improve your confidence level, how to really improve your overall well-being in terms of how much you make, how good you are with women, or even if your relationship, your marriage, whichever one that you have, right? And the strategies are there, but really where the rubber meets the work is really empowering people to do the work themselves, to do the work in the context of their own particular situation, right? It's easy to watch a Tony Robbins motivational video that does millions of views on YouTube. You feel so good. But at the end of the day, when you go back to your normal everyday living, you do the same crap, right?
Yep.
And people do that because they use motivation as a thing that just feels good. But typically, what's most necessary, and that is doing your work, typically doesn't always feel good in the moment. Just like a child has to eat the vegetables and initially they don't like it, but you give them a couple of spoonfuls and you really condition them to at least like the taste. You know, when they're growing, you cannot really control what they do. But we have to ensure that the things that we want is not always wrapped up in chocolate or something, but it's a little bit uncomfortable. You know, I like to mention people who are elite at what they do, whether it's sports stars. Yes, you may see the image on TV of they doing their thing and they being really good at what they do, but you don't see the days that they train, right? So generally, people have to adopt this mindset that to get what you want, you have to deserve what you want. And I believe it was Warren Buffett who said something like this: the world is not a foolish enough of a place to reward those who don't actually deserve what is it that they want. And to answer your question, once you begin to remove the entitlement that most of us have, generally people begin making immediate progress because it doesn't matter what your background is, how much you've faulted before, how much you've lost, the excuses go away because now everything else seems possible, even in a situation where you're not comfortable. So generally, that is where it starts. And if someone is lacking confidence, that is why the best way to help somebody is on one-on-one or individual level. And that's why it's effective. As long as that individual, maybe you're listening to this podcast, whether it's video or audio, that is why if you're not making the progress that you really want to make, it's not working because you refusing to acknowledge the parts that are uncomfortable. Yeah.
And do you deal with people, whether it's a man or a woman, that say at a younger age they've been abused, whether physically or sexually?
Not very often, but I have. And what I would say to people who've been abused, generally, they may need help they may need a lot of therapeutic help first. Because from a coaching standpoint, typically we work with people to really help them get to a desired future outcome. Whereas a particular idea that they're looking for, or if it's just overall improvement, one of our packages, if I will, it's total transformation coaching. Really help the individual over a 90-day period really become their best selves and really have the ideals, clarify the ideals that they really want, and really give them a step-by-step path to move towards there. So you may not necessarily get everything that you want in 90 days, of course, but generally you have clarity over all areas of your life of what is it you really want and an actual strategy to get there that you can implement over time. The reason I mention this is that typically if one is traumatized from abuse, whether that's physical or that's sexual abuse, they typically have to work on that first. Because just like one who has post-traumatic disorder after seeing a lot of gruesome activity in war, right? It really affects the psyche. And doesn't mean you're a bad person, but it just means that typically they should be getting some help for that first. And as much as I speak on being mentally tough, I speak on really letting your pain sometimes be your message, not being ashamed of it. We have to humanize ourselves in that sometimes we need an external person to help us heal, right? And that is the other part in that a lot of ambitious people, the fault with people who are very ambitious, they typically are very hard on themselves. So when you find the self-defeating thoughts, sometimes it's not because you lack confidence, it's because you know you could do it better. And then you just, see this expletive sometimes. It happens to all of us. But as much as we can push, we also have to be a bit more self-loving as well. So typically, if one has been abused before, I would recommend they do that first. It doesn't mean they cannot get coached. It just depends on how severe that it is. And it just depends on really what they're really trying to achieve. Because some forms of abuse, some instances of abuse can take a much longer time to heal. Yeah.
And so someone gets a hold of you and they're wanting to get coaching from you. They're going to say, well, where do you come from? and given me advice on how to get my life started. What have you done? So what would you tell them?
Can you repeat the question? I didn't get the last part.
I was just saying, if someone came to you and said, where's your experience? How can you tell me what I need to do? What is it that you've done in your life?
I love this question, actually. I love this question for a lot of reasons because I will give you multiple angles here. Because one, I started coaching at a relatively young age, actually. And it's something I got a lot. Believe it or not, it's something that I got a lot. It's by being qualified, this by being certified as an actual coach, and that's verifiable. It's something that I've gotten before. Now, here's how I respond to this, or here's how most people, whether you're a coach or in general, here's the response to this. A coach, the role of a coach is really to facilitate change, to facilitate someone's transformation. So my experience is, yes, it is very relevant. And for me personally, started a couple of businesses, lost a child, I've left, excuse me, my teaching job and failed multiple times. So I really know what rock bottom looks like. So when I speak and I say that, generally people who've had many mess ups in life, they tend to really give up on themselves because they believe that there's nothing better for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I speak from experience, first of all, but it's not just about me. I'm saying that in general, that one, not only is a coach a facilitator of changing others, but a coach really helps you stay accountable to your highest self, the best version of you that you're really after. It helps you, they help you keep accountable to that version. So I am not doing the work for you. I'm facilitating your transformation, right? I'm just giving you the tools to help you move forward in an accelerated manner that you would have to do yourself, right? So one, we would clarify the role of a coach here. Now, want to say why me or why someone else? And it's not really a fair question because what one would ask is why not you, right? A lot of people typically doubt instruction and they use it as a way to not do the work. And I speak from experience. And whilst, like I said a while ago, the quality of your coach does matter. I'm not pushing that aside at all. I'm simply saying that a good coach knows how to challenge you, irrespective of their experience level. Yes, I said that. And secondly, a good mentee, a good student, does the work really well, regardless of the experience level of a coach. Unless you sports, for example, there is particular players. I know soccer is not the biggest thing in America, but whether it's hockey, whether it's American football, there are certain players on certain teams that just do well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to understand that a coaching relationship, a healthy coaching relationship is not just the coach, it's also the person doing the work as well. So if one isn't as committed as they should be, if one isn't willing to be accountable, not to the coach, but to themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Typically, it's not as fruitful. So while it's healthy to have a certain degree of skepticism as to who you coach from, you need to really take some time to see whether they resonate with you. Their story does matter, so being open, being authentic about their feelings as well, and leading you from that standpoint, not from this guru, I am better than you, because that's really not what a coaching relationship is. And people who position themselves that way as coaches, they may get some clients, but they never really get meaningful change because understanding the fundamentals of what that relationship is supposed to look like, typically what yields the most results. And I want you to trust me, not because I say I want you to trust me, but I want to demonstrate to you that I've been in your shoes before in one way or the other. And I have the courage and the authenticity to challenge you to be more, even when you're hurting. Not for me, obviously, but really for you. And I have the relatability to be able to relate to you once you're struggling and be able to help you where you're at right now. Generally, that's why a coach is very good for you. And if you're vetting the coach, these are the things that you should watch for. Have a look at the past information, whether it's podcasts, and I do have mine, by the way, High Achievers podcast, whether that's YouTube videos, See whether they resonate with you. So generally, that is how I would say to do it. And one more thing on this is that the most popular coach may not always be the one that's better for you. And it's really important that people look out for coaches that really resonate well with them. Not the one that tells you what you really want to hear, but the one that really just gets you. Right?
Right.
So I like to make one tries to, or one asks, what makes a coach good for you? That's a very valid question. But the counter question is that what makes you good enough for a coach, for the coach as well? Because typically when people are very honest and they really want to make the transformation work, that's when you get wonders. And typically the experience of the coach is not always, it's important, but it's not always the biggest factor. I really hope that helps.
Yeah, and I guess it goes without saying, your clients, their success is your success.
Yes, generally, I try not to take credit for my client's success. But yes, in general, yes. Because for me, I see myself more as a facilitator, and I would say that I'm really helping you bring out the greatness that you already have. And yes, a good coach really does make a difference. But that is why I like to use the ambitious tagline, because coaching, or I would say my coaching, isn't always for everybody. Meaning that some people just want to be average. Some people they don't want more for themselves. And that's okay. It's
Mm-hmm.
not something you force on someone, right? And people may have different definitions of success. And some people, they may not want to make more money, for example. They like where they're at, and that's fine. They may not want to improve their relationships. They may not want to do the extra work. Maybe they have a part-time job right now when they're struggling to really break out so that they could start their own business, or that they could really have the time to actually have a healthy life, time for the kids, time for their family, and still pay the bills. So a lot of people who have the income, but they struggle with keeping it all together. There are so many particular issues. So really, a good coach, one, doesn't always take the credit, right? But really helps the client bring out the best in them. And yes, once the clients do well, it does reflect well on us as well.
And you were a PE teacher, right?
Yeah, I used to be around 5 years ago. And it's funny you mentioned this, because I got to see a lot of kids who are precocious in that they had such talent young. And I mean, we live on the islands here, and they may not always have the access to the facilities and the extra investment necessary to fully live up to their potential. And a lot of them fall by the wayside. So not just them being young, but a lot of people are older as well. You find that whether it's a talent, whether it's something that they said they wanted to do, they wanted to become. And yes, we change, our aspirations change, and that's fine. But generally, a lot of people, they have that spark in the eye, something that really got them out of bed every day. As life goes on, as we begin to settle more into the mundane living, people lose that,
Yeah.
right? And that is what typically I like to help people get back. Because as long as you have that, there is always a reason to live. There is always another day to strive for. There is always another reason to go through something, because there is something on the other side that really fulfills you. And money is good, but money isn't always the entire piece of that puzzle, because a lot of people have money and they will trade it in for peace of mind. And this is not to say money is bad. Money is a really good thing. But the point is, financial success isn't always cookie cutter success. And it really comes down to the individual. And I can only help you get clear on what that is for you, right?
Right.
It's not something you could just, you may have an idea as to what you want for yourself. That's awesome. But generally, different strings will move to different strings. So what may fulfill me may not necessarily fulfill someone else. They may be at a different stage of their life. They may be at a point where they probably did well already financially and just want to be able to enjoy what they have. That's a different set of problems right there. Or some people, they may be struggling trying to make 5 figures, 6 figures, right? And they may have the business part down, but they cannot hold a relationship to save their lives, right? And it's making them miserable, right? So really good coaching and really transformation in general comes down to being honest on an individual level as to what it really takes to get there, and being willing to receive feedback as to what it takes to get there. And secondly, being willing to be coached. And that is why I said a good coach is useful, but whomever's learning has to be coachable as well. And typically, even when the coach isn't great, I would say, you'll be surprised how fast someone can change once they have the right, someone who really understands them, someone who really authentically challenges them, not from a place where I am better than you. That never works. We all know that, right?
Right.
But from a place that I've been there, I feel your pain, but I want you to do a little more. Here's why, right? You have it in you, give it your best, and let's see where we go from there. So really that's what it takes. And generally, that's what it takes to affect massive change. One of the things that I say is that we all have a next level, right? Most people haven't taken the time to figure out what that is for them, right? And I did mention about having the courage to even really fully map that out. But most people don't really have the time. They're so lost in social media. They're so lost in other people's ideas of how to live, other people's version of how they should dress, how they should look, how they should, the lines that they should say to women, for example, or the opposite sex. They haven't really taken time to look within and ask, what do I want? What do I want out of this life to make it meaningful? What would it take to make my life a life worth living? Right? Despite all the things I've been through, despite all the things that have happened before that I may not have direct control over, what do it take to really reach my full potential, not someone else's mind? And what does that look like? So typically, as long as one has an idea, strong idea of what that is, and they're actively doing their best, the results come almost instantaneously. Because once you begin to focus on that, rather than the problems, the struggles that we have right now, the excuses go away. And that is where you see change that seems instant. But I say that I'm simply helping you get out of your own way.
Were you able to adapt a lot of your skills as a teacher into your life coaching?
Yes, actually, because the thing with teaching, I taught younger kids, is that you learn to be patient and you learn to not always see things your way. And initially it can be frustrating because it's almost like you know how to solve something, you just want them to do it. But you have to realize people are different. We're emotional, especially, but also we're motivated by different things, right? We fear different things, we have different motivations. And the formula to really get someone to stick, to really get someone to really make the change that they really want to make and have them move past their own limiting beliefs may be different for most people. And that's where the experience as a coach comes in. So teaching, yes, being a bit more patient and really trying to relate to the client a lot better. And not just how I think it should be done, right? That's really where a good coach comes in, because yes, they'll push you, but they're actually adaptable. Sometimes your very best methods may not work for a particular client. And do you just give up on them? That's a good question. And sometimes you have to change. You have to try different tools. You have to try different modalities. For example, some people are motivated by wealth. So some men, for example, may like cars, fast cars. That's cool. Nothing wrong with that. Some men may like bikes, right? Whether it's, what is the name? Harley, right? Some people may have a motivation for other things, right? So one of the questions I'd like to ask is, why is it that you want a particular ideal? So most people have a number, and I like to get the number because most of me say that they don't want, wealth is not a big thing for them. But in my experience, they're not being 100% honest with themselves. I'm not saying they're not being honest. Do not misinterpret my words. They're not being 100% honest with themselves. It's not with me. Because there is always a reason why we have a particular number. And whatever your number is, it's fine. No judgment there. We're all different. But the point is, everything that we do has an underlying motivation behind it. And as long as you're honest enough to find out what that is, typically that is where we get the impetus to do more. Because then it brings clarity of I want this, Here's why. Why am I here right now? What have I been telling myself that's keeping me right here? What have I been tolerating within myself, within others, that has me where I am right now? Yes, we all have particular limitations. We all have made mistakes. But what could I do right now with what I have right now? And what else should I be doing? So that gap, it really closes, but that gap really, you begin to see life as half glass full and half glass empty. And generally, that is what I would say that teaching has really helped with: being patient, seeing people where they're at, and actually really helping people evolve from the problems that they have to where they really want to go, and customizing that for them. Because I would say one thing: we're not all the same. And I just mentioned the idea of many people having different motivations, or being motivated for various things. A lot of people may want a lot of money for women. That's fine. I'm not judging. A lot of people may want it for the material things. A lot of it may want it for their families, right? Maybe you want to send your daughter to a particular school, a private school. Maybe you may want to send your son to a particular school where you could take over the family business, right? Maybe you want to buy a bigger house for your family, for your wife, right? So people need the awareness. And generally, teaching, I would say, has helped me be a bit more patient and has really helped me with that part of the business.
Do you have a website?
Yes. My website is CraigeHardel.com. If you're listening, that is Craigehardel.com. It's been revamped slightly, but everything's on there. That's my website.
Then I'm assuming you're on social media.
Yeah. On all platforms: LinkedIn, Instagram, even Facebook, Twitter, but I don't use it actively. It's Craige Hardel. It's just my name, the correct spell. I'm assuming the links for those will be in the show notes wherever this gets posted.
Yeah, I always try to put all that information in the description. But and your podcast, where can you find your podcast?
Yeah. The name of my podcast is the High Achievers Podcast, and it's a podcast that highlights the stories of prominent individuals who have overcome quite a bit in their lives and have really been now in a position where they want to teach and they want to serve others in their particular profession. It need not be a coaching profession, and that they really want to be an example for others. So we highlight the lessons from their stories, and also teachable moments that people can apply into their lives immediately. We have more of that in a membership that we have, but generally, a really excellent source of free information for people, I would say, is our High Achievers Podcast. Simply go to my website or visit creator.com/podcast, and you'll get all that information.
All right, man. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I really appreciate it. I feel a little more enlightened.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. This is the first interview I've had in a bit, and we've been working on quite a few things and really making things better for everyone that interacts with our content, and really creating a much better experience for everyone, because I believe we live in a time where we have different needs. We have different needs in that people, not just financially, but the world is moving so quickly. And whilst we have external things going on, people don't pay attention to what's on the inside. And not just how they feel and how they can cope, but also what it would take to actually really reach their full potential in all angles, whether that's emotional, in their relationships, money, in terms of high income skills that they could learn, and really how they could, no matter what the situation is, whether you have college education, whether you did not have a college education, how to really make the most of whatever situation that you're in. So we live in a time where we lack practical knowledge, practical application to a particular individual, and an actual community to help people who really want to grow, rather than having 100 sources of information in your inbox or etc. and just doing the work. So typically I'm trying to really foster this for people who are really willing. And that is what we do with the podcast, with our membership, and with the coaching that we do. So it's always a pleasure coming on. And it's always a pleasure speaking to the young minds. When I say young, I don't just mean in age, but in really the vitality for more, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really a pleasure coming on.
It feels a lot different on the other side of the mic, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome you asked me that because, yeah, I mean, we've been doing so many interviews. I mean, I'm editing quite a few right now, and I have a backlog. And I mean, I'm experiencing this for the first time, and I'm like, this is work. And it's fine, but I do miss, like I said, being on this side of the mic where I don't have to do all the prep. I mean, I have to do some prep, of course, but it's not as much as running a show. But also, I get to really help people by speaking to them without much of a filter. When I say this, I don't mean in terms of crass language. I mean in terms of not feeling the need to hold back, right? There's a lot of people, they come seeing both sides of the mic. They come all prepared, all cookie cutter. That's fine. But there are a lot of people who don't relate to that. One thing I like to say, not to keep this part too long, is that the guru effect we have right now, I am not a guru, right? If you go online, I'm not super famous, right? But the guru effect, it doesn't work for everybody. People genuinely are sick of it. Let's be
right.
Honest, right? That, you're this expert and you have all the answers. You're very good at what you do. No denying that. But typically, I find that is not the most effective way to reach someone. Branding is important, but you really have to relate to people. So for me, being unapologetically me and relating to the people that hear this, for me, is very, very important. And nothing teaches that more, to your question, than being on the other side of the mic, actually. And actually seeing different people, different backgrounds. I mean, we have clients. So, I mean, I see that. But it's very different. And seeing how people sometimes posture, I get it. But at the end of the day, impact for me is the biggest needle. And typically that moves everything else. So I just wanted to see that last part. But again, it's been a pleasure coming on, and I'm really thankful for the opportunity.
Thank you. And it's all about helping other people. And I also want to thank all you out there. If you are new to this channel, well, first off, I hope you'll come back and please hit that subscribe button. For my regulars out there, you guys are awesome. You make it possible for me to do this, and share this out and give it a like, give us a comment. And so until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network